won Super Bowl 36. Unbelievable.
That's the way you should win a Super Bowl.
Man,
I mean, they come in here against all odds. They were backed up. They had no timeouts. And they drove the ball down and got in field goal position. That was a great, great drive.
This was the moment when the New England Patriots won the Super Bowl for the first time. That moment wasn't just about winning. It was about history. It was about connection. For Patriots fans, it was the culmination of years of hope, heartbreak, and belief. But more than that, it was a proof of why we love sports, why we show up, why we cheer, why we suffer, why we celebrate. Because sports are more than a game. They're the stories that shape our lives, the moments that bond us, whether it's a father and son watching their team fight for a premiership, a city uniting behind an underdog, a country coming together to witness themselves on the world stage, or a young fan seeing their heroes in person for the first time. Sports are the ultimate emotional connective tissue. They remind us that we're part of something bigger. Welcome to Season 9 of The Great Indoors, where we explore the transformative role of storytelling in an era of generative AI. As technology shapes our culture and products, the risk of homogeneity looms large. This season will discuss how embracing unique narratives can counterbalance AI's influence, ensuring our stories retain depth, authenticity, and originality. Join us as we champion the human voice in the digital age. I'm your host, Matthew Roberts, and as ever, I'm joined by the one and only podcast producer supremo, Larissa Yee. Now, speaking of connections, today we welcome back a very special guest. And believe it or not, it's been 5 years since he first joined us on The Great Indoors back in Season 1, 5 years. And I remember at the time we had a lot of fun and a great conversation back in 2020. Now, a lot has changed since then, but one thing remains the same: his sense of humor. And of course, Nick Fitzy Stevens still lives and breathes Boston sports. Now, Nick is a seasoned content creator and on-air personality with over 2 decades of experience in the sports media industry. He's best known for his work as a host on WEEI Sports Radio Network and as a charismatic in-stadium host for the New England Patriots, where he entertains thousands of fans at Gillette Stadium. Beyond the microphone, Nick has made his mark as a writer, producer, comedian, creating engaging content that resonates with fans across multiple platforms. Today he's back to talk about why sports brings us together, how they shape our stories, and why, no matter how much technology advances, nothing can replace the raw, unscripted magic of the game. So I want to welcome back Nick Fitzy Stevens. So, welcome back to The Great Indoors. I think we got a great episode lined up for you today. We're welcoming back one of our guests from the first season 5 years ago. He's finally got over the PTSD from that original episode 5 years ago. So we've got him back. It's Mr. Nick Fitzy Stevens, all the way from Boston. Welcome back, Nick.
It is an absolute pleasure to be back where I spend most of my time, The Great Indoors. And it's funny that you mention it's been almost 5 years since we've been together, because there is a principle in sports where they say that you are not allowed to complain about your favorite sports team for 5 years after they win a championship.
So 5 years off.
Wander the desert of experience in life to make sure that I was fitting to be ready to come back into the best that I have.
Well, that was our thinking as well, right? So we thought that all through before we made that invite. And thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you back. So Nick, for our listeners, we've got a new listener base over the last 5 years. So give them a quick overview of your history, yourself, and your life in sports.
As they like to say, Willkommen, bienvenue, and cheers, Hawaii. I grew up on the South Shore of Boston in a family of sports fans and theater people, hence my dramatic way of enjoying what I actually traffic in socially as well as professionally. I currently work in sports radio in Boston for WEEI FM. I produce content on my own and people regionally as well as within the parameters, if you will, of the international base of New England Patriots fandom, or Pats Nation. Know me as Fitzy, and I actually work for the team as well I've become as some know me, the jolly jester on the Jumbotron. So if you were to attend a Patriots game, although it been some pretty lean times in Pat's fandom since the last time we spoke as well. A lot of people like to blame me like, hey, Stevens, ever since the Patriots hired you to be the ding-dong on the Jumbotron in games, we haven't gone to the playoffs. But I get to do something, that I would have never dreamed of. And that's obviously providing fan service, working my hardest to bring a little extra joy and glee to football fans on game day. And, my children now are ages 12 and 7. And everything I used to do as a sports fan used to be all about reaching back to when I learned how to be a fan and grew my own passions with my dad. Then I had all of my own experiences on my own. And now everything I try to do is to grow the fandom of my kids and try to give them positive experiences and learn the highs and the lows and why we sports fan, and hopefully make them maybe not as rabid and fanatical about Boston sports as I am, but at least give them something that they can connect over and they can cheer with and they can argue with their friends over for decades to come.
No, I like that, the connection piece, right? That's, when we get into sports and what it can bring us, we're going to talk about storytelling, but that connection, that human connection, those shared experiences and shared values. And do you find with your children, because my children are similar age to yours, Nick, and you're going to be really impressed with something in a second that I'll tell you. But do you have that connection with them? Do you go to games together? Is it something that's a memorable, irreplaceable part of family life for you?
Yes, it's becoming that way. My children are not me, and I don't want them to be just like, my God. I mean, who would ever wish their children to be, like a Florida avocado-shaped Guy Smiley who loves Tom Brady too much to this day? As far as that connection, yes, like I grew to understand over time in my relationship with my father, who's been gone about 3 years now, and you learn to win through the memories and the experiences. And that's why I always say that sports is the ultimate emotional connective tissue. I can hearken back, I tell friends now, like, maybe my relationship with my children in sports will never be as crazed as it was with my dad, but I'm so grateful for all the time. You could say like, well, shouldn't you and your dad have gone on some hikes? Like, I don't know how to ski. We never did a lot of outdoorsy stuff. And I'll say no, because like I've got the richness of remembering all the times my dad would call me in a playoff game watching football. And he would say, all right, Nico, you're on offense. I'm on defense this half. So I expect touchdowns and field goals the entire time, and I'm not letting them score. Like, all right, Dad. And it was just like, air high five and break. It was wild. All the times growing up, we went to so many games. All the times you knew in my house growing up that it was a very special day if my dad would go into the kitchen and grab the kitchen TV and then bring it into the den, our TV room, and stack it upon the other TV, because that meant there was probably a Patriots football game on while there was a Red Sox playoff game on. So we had to like double rabbit ear it and jerry rig the whole entire operation and make sure the antenna was pointed the right way. Like, that's right, kids. Everyone listening, there was a time where you couldn't like have a laptop and a TV and your phone out and just be clearly streaming, 4K video of everything also while you were engaging on social media. The original social media back then was either calling your friends or opening the window to yell to your neighbors, hey, how about that play, huh? And so now with my kids, it is different. I've taken them to Red Sox games, Patriots games. We've actually gone to see the New England rugby team, the Free Jacks. I've done a little work for them, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it because of the very familial nature of the gatherings. It's local, it's inexpensive, and it's a fast-paced, very physical game, and they're into it. And so now, as some of the Boston teams went through a little bit of a lull, but now the Celtics are good, the Red Sox are getting better, there's optimism in the air for the New England Patriots. My kids have gone from, my dad, he was sad because he used to love the team that loves Tom Brady, now into like, hey, Dad, when can we go to a game again? That's all I ask, is that the teams be representative of the region and give them something to love, and then that we can create our own memories, different that they may be from the ones I had with my dad, that we can create our own unique game day experiences. And, I even was able to last season, I do a couple things where I give away stuff to the fans at Patriots games. And so my kids never really believed it until they saw it themselves. And I actually dragged them into, as my little prize elves, if you will, on a segment on the Jumbotron. So now we've got video and we've got a photo of me on the world's largest single panel LCD TV, giving away like airplane tickets to somebody with my kids there waving to the crowd.
No, I love what you said there. Sport is the ultimate connective tissue. It is. And in this digital world that we're living in, I don't think anything in life replaces that experiences that you have. I remember growing up going to Anfield with my father. My parents even courted and dated at Liverpool Football Club at Anfield. I mean, they got divorced like 20 years later, you know. Even on my wall here, I have the sign of Anfield because I remember when I was a young boy, 5 or 6, as soon as I saw that sign, I was close to the stadium and knew that I was, you know, that experience of being there. I love that, the notion of the connective tissue. Now, something I was going to tell you before, and you'll be really pleased about this, Nick, and I think as well, you know, obviously you grew up in Boston. I grew up near Liverpool. And it doesn't matter which sport or which culture or which country, there's that commonality amongst sports fans, right? Whichever team or sport. I've failed as a father because I talk about my father taking me to Liverpool from a young age. And I was brought up as you were with the Patriots. My son was born here in Canada. He's 7 years of age now. He plays hockey and his number one team is the Boston Bruins.
Oh, good boy.
I knew his room is decked out in Bruins stuff. He has the Bruins shirt. And as someone who lives in Toronto, that's probably a dangerous thing for him to be into.
You say you failed. I say congratulations. That's a dad dub right there, because considering that the Boston Bruins are actually the paternal owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Maple Leafs have saved the postseason bacon of the Bruins, why would you subject your child to the tortures of, first round failure that the Maple Leafs provide on a regular basis? It's if we were like recording right now and you're like, so I'm coming to you from Long Island. And I got to tell you, I failed as a father because, everyone around me is Jets fans, but you walk into my room and the kid's got a shrine to freaking Tom Brady of all people, to which I would say, good job, Dad, because you prevented your child from going through the horrors, Heart of Darkness style of being a Jets fan. And if I said this years ago, I apologize, but it's worth repeating. I often say, kind of like with soup and good dips and a lot of things, like the flavor is on the bottom. The saltiness, the richness, the desire, the passion, the hate, the disappointment, all that emotional soup that goes into perpetual failure and disappointment in sports fandom makes for a richness and depth of character, and sometimes some fortitude and resilience. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's why I tell fans in the Boston region now, like, it's good to stink all over again. Yes, embrace the suck. It's going to make you appreciate the greatness that you were treated to, and hopefully we'll see happen once again. And B, when and if you do succeed again, oh my God, the joy that it brings you from not just like, we live in a society where we just press buttons all the time and they're supposed to create instant dopamine release. Like, that's not how sports works. Is a long commitment to hope. And more often than not, in leagues, whether it's Premier League, the NFL, different teams are going to fail. Your season, your 6-month, your 12-month long commitment is going to end in disappointment. So how do you divine positives? Where do you experience the joy? Why is it worth the time for you?
No, that's perfect. The notion of the sweet is never the sweet without the sour. Right. And the fact that you have to be patient and you have to go through pain. But when your team eventually has that success, the pleasure that you get from that is indescribable. It really is. Now, when we talk about, and you create content as well, right, Nick? And when you talk about sports, you're passionate about it. And we talked about getting your family involved, the share experiences, the connective tissues that sport brings. But when you create content now, whether it's short form videos or writing or whatever it is you do, given the tools at your disposal, like ChatGPT, generative AI, you can create TikTok, Instagram Reels.
I think it appropriately blew up during the pandemic on the tail end of things, when we could all only rewatch Tiger King, Ted Lasso, or Bake Sourdough together so many times.
How's that influenced your content creation?
Actually, for the better, though I still believe that unless the intervention of parents, storytellers, or people of a studied mind come to the fore, we're gonna breed a generation and then another generation of people that are not going to know how to tell a full story.
Yeah.
Like I sometimes have to intervene when my children wake up in the morning and immediately throw on YouTube and just watch YouTube shorts and, try not to laugh videos.
Mr. Beast.
At least they'll go through, they can watch Mr. Beast. They can watch Mark Rober. They can watch a certain number. My oldest boy, Thomas, the 12-year-old, loves this chef, Nick DiGiovanni. He's a young, handsome dude who's created a massive following. And now he is inspired just as much as my efforts and failures in the kitchen, my 12-year-old to start to cook. Dad, can I help you make the sauce? Dad, let me cook my own steak, because he watches this guy. And there's at least an arc in the episode. He tells you a full story, whether it's 5, 7, or 12 minutes. I'm afraid all this instantly accessible brain rot internet stuff, the TikToks, like the things, like I said, press a button, you'll get a 20-second dopamine release and you get a quick high.
Look, I've been reading about it a lot recently with Dr. Anna Lemke and Dopamine Nation. It's terrifying. Yeah, it
is. It really is. And so, my kid might be the only one in his 6th grade class who only has an Apple Watch as opposed to a phone. He's like, Dad, everyone else has one. I'm like, good. And if everyone else was jumping off a bridge, I'm glad that you'd be the only one there watching them all jump off, because you're not getting a phone anytime. You've got plenty of ways. My old radio co-host used to say, God, the biggest problem with this generation now, they don't know how to be bored. From boredom will come creativity, will come storytelling. And so back to your initial question, it's good. I'm just fearful that kids are not going to know how to tell full stories because they just generate some, in 30 seconds, I got a quick lull or a yuck or a reshare. But as far as it's just, to me, it's added another tool to the belt. I still love a long form podcast. I like a 4-hour radio show. I can sit through a whole game and not get antsy. In terms of how I use TikTok and Instagram, it's just a different way to access this generation in particular. So rather than labor through the whole notion of this video needs to be 3 minutes or 8, 10, 15, if I have a singular thought or one line I think might be funny, I'll find a way to create a quick narrative around it, or I'll just do a selfie style video with a quick caption. And the funny thing is, those things reshare, repost, new followers. And then hopefully what you get is people that don't have the expectation of walking up to the feeder and having it release a snack, but rather sitting in front of the machine and waiting for it to make the food for you and then ultimately get that. Maybe they'll then go back and say this guy actually does some longer form content as well. I think you should be a good storyteller now, should be able to hook you and engage you in 15 or 30 seconds the same way that they can enthrall and enrich your life over 10, 30 minutes, 2 hours and beyond.
Yeah. No, and I think as well with the sort of short form content like Instagram and TikTok, I think the whole point of any story is to elicit emotion, right, from the person who's hearing your story. And you cannot do that in a 35-second Instagram reel. They'll go, okay, that's cool. Oh, I like that's cool. But the real essence of a story is that emotive hook, right? Mm-hmm. That digital content can't give you. And have you used ChatGPT at all? Because this is my thinking on this. You have, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, Nick, you have a charismatic, humorous, engaging personality, right? So when you talk and so therefore you're naturally predisposed to good storytelling and engaging and connecting with people, right? That's why you do what you do. But ChatGPT allows people now to be a little bit more creative with their writing, to even come up with jokes in inverted commas, because it's never managed to make me laugh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But have you had to rely, or do you use it as for anything you do with your creative process?
No, I refuse to, as a matter of fact. It absolutely, in every way, shape, or form, feels like cheating to me. It's not that it's inauthentic, because it is now authentically a part and even well ingrained in our establishment, our society. And there are ways people use it from medicinal to narrative to militaristic to all sort of financial benefit. I get it. I haven't fully invested my mind around the entire idea of everything it can do for me. And it's not that I fear that I will be one of the many contributors or lemmings walking into Judgment Day when we ultimately are enslaved or destroyed by AI. But though I fear that a little bit, like any person should, because technology is our friend and an asset only to a point upon which like we teach it to be better than us and then we're doomed. But as far as using it in my work or even just in my day to day, I believe, and this isn't just because, I've seen people like, once again, falling back on sports. Tom Brady used to always say like, it was just as important for him to keep his body in tune as it was to keep his mind. So every day he just played games, crossword puzzles, Sudokus, whatever, just to keep his mental acuity as sharp as it is. And I'm 51. I may not necessarily look all of the part, or definitely don't act the part, but I know it's not going to be easier to keep my body in reasonable shape to keep up with life, my children, and the same with my mind. And so if my response to everything is, hey, let me just let a cloud or a server farm in Denmark or Las Vegas or Canada do the work for me, whether it's remembering the name of the third baseman on the 1977 Red Sox, a football player who made a key interception, or asking it to structure a pitch for a television show. I just feel like it's only going to soften my mind a little bit or take away some of the things that I've spent decades trying to sharpen, hone, and use to my benefit.
Exactly. And I think, like I said, the charisma, the charm, the humor, they're things you can't offload to generative AI. And so you would start taking those qualities away from you just automatically by relying on those things. And I think they're the important elements of human storytelling that I don't think can be replaced. But every human can learn them, right? People develop their humor or their charm or their charisma in their life because they've had something they had to, bring it up to.
I think that's the old adage, or the formula, I should say rather, that comedy equals tragedy divided by time. And, there are those who believe that a laugh is never too soon because humor helps heal. And there's obviously a lot of truth in comedy as well. And I'm a proponent of that too. Artificial intelligence can learn over time. It can read your material. It can learn your style. But ultimately, all it's really doing is emulating. And, there's one authentic you. There can be a style people come to know from you, whether it's being glib, talking too much, dad jokes, whatever, some of the things that I'm known for and appreciate, like it'll create in your style, but it'll never intimately be you. And so as long as when so much of what I exist on my platform, like you say, is very personality based. And if I give in to a robot trying to create that, then I'm doomed. And, I do a lot of voice work as well. And that's another big thing is you see actors, voice actors, performers now fighting and pushing back against the idea that we clipped 30 seconds of your voice. And then a month later, we taught a robot to just be you. And that's the end of someone else swooping in and saying,
they've tried to clone me, by the way, using generative AI.
You're kidding.
It's immeasurably more charming and funny than me, which is the worrying thing, which defeats the point I'm trying to make here. They did propose it. It hasn't happened quite yet, has it, Larissa? They're still trying to do it. And I think that's horrifying for everyone involved. But let's go back to storytelling in sports, because like I said, I think, to me, the purest, most authentic, most emotive stories in the world revolve around sports. Let me give you an example. One of our guests said to us, even if you take I guess it's a sport, chess, right? Now, chess has been mastered by computers and robots. They've figured chess out completely, like an equation. But people still will not pay to watch two computers or robots slugging it out over a game of chess. They'll still want to watch two humans that are going up against each other, their own wit, their own thoughts, their own pitfalls. And that's why I think in sports, the emotion that you get from a game is uniquely human. Right? The elation that you have, the disappointment like we talked about before, is deeply human. So when you articulate those sporting stories, it can't be any more authentic than that, right?
No, it can't. I think that's actually one of the reasons why recently in the NFL postseason, where the Philadelphia Eagles ultimately won the Super Bowl, people were pushing back. And we have a natural predisposition to pushing back against anything that's been great for so long. I remember it for all those years when the New England Patriots were at the top of the hill and they were the kings of the NFL. And then subsequently the Chiefs took over. And I think a lot of people thought while it's not true to the best of our knowledge, and what an unbelievable expose that would be if there were truth to it. But people said, oh, the referees are favoring the Chiefs all the time. Taylor Swift dates Travis Kelce, and that helps prop up the NFL and is globalizing it and helping it reach a bigger audience. They've seen the profit margin and thought, well, if we just tweak the narrative a little bit, that'll help us reach our end game. And if that were ever true, it would just break millions and if not billions of hearts, because people go to the NFL, people go to live sports because it is the ultimate reality show. It's unscripted. You enter into this 3-hour movie not knowing, you're going to have ups and downs, cheers, joy, frustration, anger, sadness, and hopefully ultimately satisfaction and happiness, but only one team can win all the time. But if it were to actually be scripted, if it were actually just predetermined, then it would be not only just a scandal, it would be a true tragedy. That would become the story. The narrative that would take over would be that richer people thought that the mass populi and the plebes needed this storyline spoon-fed to them, as opposed to just letting happen whatever could happen. A bummer, but oh yeah, I mean, I embrace. Now listen, I will say this, because I was treated for so long, the majority of my adult life to date was spent cheering for teams that succeeded more often than not. I'm a little spoiled. And, the Boston became the new title town, and then I dubbed it End Title Town, because people just woke up like, oh, another year, another Super Bowl, another World Series, wash, rinse, repeat, awesome. And I understand why people loathed Boston for that reason alone. That and the fact they were awful drivers, super rude, and our coffee's kind of cruddy. But yeah, like now, turning the corner and going back to stinking, that's good for you. It makes you incredibly humble. But like the stories that I've picked up along the way in tragedy and in triumph are like the tent poles that I can go back and look to in my life. I can tell you, so late January, early February, as a Boston sports fan, evokes a lot of memories because the Patriots were so frequently involved in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, and there were parades. I even got to ride in one once, which was truly one of the top 10 moments of my life that didn't involve me naming a human or marrying somebody. And it was unbelievable. But I can look back to, oh, where was I when they lost that game? Or where was I when that Super Bowl happened? Like the first time the Patriots won the Super Bowl, it was February 2002. And they beat the Rams in one of the greatest upsets in American sports history. And I remember when it was all over, I was in this huge, just pig pile of other friends of mine in New York City that were Boston sports fans. An absolute scrum, just hugging, cheering, crying, beers flying everywhere. I won the football squares pool. A buddy of mine took this bucket of money and goes, "Congratulations, Stevens," and just pours dollar bills all over me. It probably looked like the saddest strip club in the entire world. I'm just rolling around in beer dudes and dollar bills. And I went into my buddy's bedroom, grabbed my cell phone, which barely had any juice left, and I called my dad immediately.
That connective tissue.
Nico, can you believe it? We're both just screaming at each other. And I remember telling him at the end of the conversation, he's like, "Where were you?" I was like, "My buddy Chad's house with all my New York buddies." Oh, and Emily was there. We've been together for dating and together almost half a lifetime now, but we had only been dating for maybe 2 months to that time. And I said, "Dad, yeah, Emily was there and we had the best time. So happy right now. Dad, I'm going to marry this woman." That's the first time that thought even entered my mind, or I said that out loud. We'd been dating barely 2 months. And here I am 23 years later telling you that somehow we're still together, homeowners, 2 children. And she'd be the first to tell you, holy smokes, this guy watches too much football.
We talk about the connective tissue, the shared experience, the emotive. All of these things that we've talked about are so uniquely human, are so irreplaceable, are so far away from digitalization, are so, when you look at the dopamine deficiencies in children with too much digital screen time, it's like I had a bit of an epiphany. It's very much the catharsis. It's very much the last human. I'm trying to think of anything that comes close to what we've talked about in our daily lives. And everything is being overtaken by digitalization, our TVs, like we talked about, the media, everything. But sports is immune to this right now. It's immune, and it's so healthy for you mentally. I think it's incredible. My mind is racing to think of anything that comes close, but I don't think it does.
No, as a matter of fact, I was opining on the radio just a few days back. One of my frustrations, I had two particular frustrations about the contemporary state of American sports. And they are that, one, it's just too damn expensive. And the problem is kids are not going to be able to go with mom and dad or their buddies to a game unless your team absolutely sucks out loud, at which point you can go on to Seat Hub or Stub Geek. I'm not naming them because they're not sponsors of your show, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. And then you can get a ticket game day of. And that's usually when the owner says, how come these seats are supposed to be $500 and they're going for $5 and the parking lot's empty? Then coaches get fired. They spend too much in free agency, wash, rinse, repeat. But it's too expensive right now. It's too expensive for them to go. And if you can't go to the games, then the problem is you don't create that interpersonal, authentic live experience. You and I probably grew up listening to as many Liverpool matches as I did Red Sox games on AM radio. And that creates a white noise of comfort, like a blanket of companionship. So when you can't go to the live games and meet the fans and just create that dynamic experience on your own, I feel that diminishes your experience and kind of tapers off, like it's into the fandom a little bit. And two, we know too much now. There's too much digital access to everything. Growing up again, you either had to go to the match, listen to it, or read the papers the next day.
You had to do a lot of research.
Yeah, you did. Or maybe stay up till 11 o'clock to watch the nightly newscast until it would be 11:20 and your favorite beloved local Ron Burgundy of sports would tell you the score and what happened in the game. Now, while it's fun to gain access into the life of LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, whomever, at the same time, there's just too much. It's like it's this deluge, this inundation of content and information and perspective.
How much of it is true?
Who knows?
I get
a lot. Tom Brady said on a podcast 2 years ago, this LeBron James thing on HBO called The Shop, where they sit around, drink wine in a barbershop. Tom Brady said 90% of what I said is a lie because they're just saying whatever it is, either to stir up a narrative or to get the fans re-engaged as opposed to just being authentic. So I feel like not being able to go have an authentic experience interpersonally because it's so darn expensive. And then just being like, oh, did you see this TikTok? So-and-so said this on Instagram. Hey, this cornerback for this team has a podcast. He said some crazy things like, enough is enough. It just needs to go back to the fans, the games, the players, and the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, one of the things that we pushed as a company, I think the only benefit for me in having mass digital coverage of live sport is because I live the other side of the Atlantic. And I can't, I get to see more Liverpool games living in Canada than I did if I lived in England. But again, you miss that atmosphere, that shared experience, which is completely irreplaceable. And again, the costs of it now is daylight robbery. You're absolutely right. Their parents are from England originally, and they grew up as Liverpool supporters. But for them, being able to go to Liverpool or go to Anfield was like this dream, right? It wasn't like a weekly thing that I had. For them, it was a dream. And then finally, they had the opportunity to take that pilgrimage to Anfield. And the experience for them absolutely blew their minds. So again, when we talk about I guess there's some positive in being deprived of that experience, fueling us, and then seeing it for the first time. I think they could die happy after they made that pilgrimage.
I do indeed. Look, the toothpaste is well out of the tube and the genie's not going back in the bottle anytime soon. And I don't want anyone listening to think, well, wait a second, people only know who this knucklehead is because he made YouTube videos and Instagrams and on, TikToks and whatever else. Like, no, I'm all for it. It's just, I think people need to be able to structure their content consumption such that it's about the game. And then after the game, they go find their favorite voice or their favorite writer if they want to engage, or their favorite place to chat with fans in a forum, or God forbid, find the pub if you actually, so long as the kids are taken care of, whatever, and have that dialogue as opposed to everything being just a constant series of ones and zeros. Two other quick thoughts. One, obviously, like I said, several years since, the Patriots or the Red Sox had been good. Oh, poor us. But I hear from a lot of fans People would just like slide on in those DMs. They'll be like, hey, Nick, hey, Fitzy, I'm coming to Gillette for the first time ever this weekend. It's going to be so awesome. Be careful what you wish for. The first thought that always comes to my mind is, why would you want to go there now? And what it is, they want to go be where Tom Brady threw to Rob Gronkowski. They want to see where the Patriots punched their ticket to the Super Bowl or returned with a Lombardi trophy in hand. Those are those hallowed grounds. They want to see the green monster, the left field wall, where David Ortiz peppered it with fly balls and opposite field doubles. And they want to see where the Red Sox reversed the curse and ended the story. I still get emotional when people call into the radio station, when people call in and say, don't ever forget about the Red Sox, because my grandmother died after not seeing them win a World Series. And after 2004, my grandfather drove to her when the Red Sox finally won the World Series, drove to her graveside and brought a baseball, a beer, and flowers and said, Doris, they did it. They finally did it for us. Like, I even want to cry now just thinking about it. So in talking about wanting to create authentic experiences and sharing it with our children and growing love of sport, this is my predominant theme. The way you do it is live, authentic, and real, I believe. And so hopefully my kids like being a sports fan, but I've taken it to such that my favorite thing to do now in all of sports is coach. Coaching Little League when my oldest boy wanted to start playing about 7-8 years ago. And I coached Little League for him for a couple of seasons as well. Neither of my children, much like their father, are natural born athletes by any stretch, but I want them to be part of a team as opposed to an individual on a screen. I want them to learn what camaraderie and dealing with other dynamics and personalities are like. My littlest one is doing Little League now as well. And my older boy would like to ultimately one day play tackle football, but much like keeping him off of an iPhone till high school, I don't want him playing tackle football till I believe like he's big enough. I think he shouldn't play till 14 or 15, bare minimum. But I've had NFL players even say that's a good idea. Start them off in flag football. And flag football is becoming nationally, if not globally, more popular as the NFL pushes it. So I've coached my older boy's flag football team now a couple of years. And last fall, my goal was working with a neighborhood dad who I'm very good friends with. Our goal was, okay, let's put all the friends together on a team so they can create these memories. I want them to have fun together. And let's see how well we do because we're diehard football fans. Let's take these 5 decades of football fandom and living and dying by our favorite NFL team's exploits. Let's see if we can put that to work. Well, wouldn't you know, all those years of watching football, I cribbed together a playbook and molded a team, put my son and all of his best friends together. They went undefeated. They won the championship. And it was so much fun helping them create memories. But my little Herb Brooks, the old U.S. hockey coach, speech to the boys, that was all about the Miracle on Ice, creating an upset. They were undefeated going into the championship game in this flag football league. And I said to them, like, look, kids, I never won a championship. As you can tell, your coach is not terribly athletic. All I wanted was for you guys to have fun together. Now we have a chance to create a like that is mission accomplished. And you guys are going to want to keep coming back and playing together. That's great. Now we have in this final game, I don't need you to win this trophy for me because I never won one. But I want you guys to go out there and win for each other, play for each other and win tonight. I want you to create that memory. I want you to look back at that and smile and always have that because no one will ever be able to take that away from you. And they went out that night and we stunk early and then we pulled it together and they won. And in terms of just like I rode in a Super Bowl parade, I've seen my teams win dozens of championships. There's no high in my life as a sports fan like helping my son and his friends win that title.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful story, Nick. I was coaching my 12-year-old daughter's soccer team, and it's so spectacularly rewarding. I always remember one child who was really unsure of herself, really insecure. Her parents had pushed her into the team. She didn't really want to get engaged. She was very quiet. She didn't speak with the rest of the team. She was very much a loner. But by the end of the season, to see her with this new group of friends, to see the pride that she had with the rest of the team. And then on the final day of the season, she scored the first goal she'd ever scored. And the joy that she had was indescribable. But the way she even looked at her parents differently after she did that, because I think her parents, I know they don't listen to this podcast, I hope they don't, but they were a bit cruel. They were hard on her. I noticed they were really hard on her. And it gave her this self-esteem. And I always remember that as being one of the most rewarding things from coaching that team that season. Just this one young girl who was a completely different individual by the end of the season.
Yeah, listen, and I'm all for when it's the right time to apply pressure to people and to not accept a second-rate effort. You know, one of my favorite movies is Whiplash because it's a cautionary tale / meditation and what it takes to get the absolute best out of yourself. And sometimes there's intense sacrifice involved. And it's got a great soundtrack to boot. But, I could never be that guy that needs to, my agenda will not be lived through somebody else. I will not, vicariously find my joy through the exploits of my children, their friends, etc. To me, it's just about growing the love of the game and creating these memories for them. And also trying to get their best while still making sure that they're having fun because they're still kids. They need to fall down and skin knees. They need to lose. They need to win. They have to have ups and downs. This is all part of growing your brain. Isn't just about reading a book, taking a test. It's about having all of these experiences. We had a kid on our team, similarly as well. It was 5th and 6th grade boys who played on this flag football team. And we had some that were natural studs. We had some kids that were learned to be better and we got the most out of them. And then we had a couple kids that, weren't terribly good. And my goal all season long was to either have them run in a touchdown, catch a touchdown, just so they had that one signature moment. And we had this one kid who played center a lot, hands of stone, would always run left when he was supposed to go right. But the way that the team rallied around him, we had one kid, every time he would oh, gee, I guess I just can't catch the ball. I'm no good. And we had one kid that would always come over and say hey, just like coach said, a bad attitude is never going to work for the team. You're a part of this team, but also that's not going to be good. The next time you catch, you're going to think, I'm not going to be able to catch it. You have to turn it around and have a positive mindset. The fact that the kids took the positivity that I tried to imbue in them and then started self-policing and was awesome. Whenever he would get the ball in his hands, all the kids, all the parents would always cheer for him. He ultimately didn't end up scoring a touchdown, but he's got a trophy. And he said to my good buddy, who was my assistant coach this year, he asked me, he's like, Coach Chris, next year, will it be all the same players? And he said, no, I'm sorry, buddy. Some of the kids are going to graduate to 7th and 8th grade flag. And if you come back, you'll be part of 5, 6. You'll be one of the older ones. And he said, oh, that's too bad. I wish we could all stay together. He wanted to keep the family together. That's what it comes back to. He loved that element so much that a kid that had no athletic inclination wanted to keep coming back because he made a new set of memories and friends. Before they gave us a trophy, big dub right there.
Exactly. Now, Nick, we're going to get into our TGI Storytime element now. And I'm going to ask you, I don't think Larissa gave you this as a prompt, so this might be unexpected, but I want you, if you can, to regale our listeners with a story that's had a profound impact on your life. A story that is unique, authentic. It's probably going to be a sporting story, I would imagine. But I'm going to hand the mic to you for you to just tell that story. Now, it could have been a game you were at. It could have been a movie you watched. It could have been a song you heard, a poem you read, a magazine, whatever it was. However that story could have been your grandfather telling you about something. But however that story was delivered to you, that if you could recount that for our listeners, that would be awesome.
TGI Storytime.
There's a million ways to go about this. I've lived, loved, traveled, laughed, experienced triumph and joy like I couldn't imagine. 2 kids, lost 2 parents, both a little bit too early as well. My youth growing up, Boston sports fandom, both of my parents as well, and then it'll have an addendum to it that's more joyful. And there's, like I said, always truth and comedy and tragedy as well. People often have even said to me, I love your videos after big wins and when things are going well, but our favorite videos of yours are when the teams crap the bed or lose the ultimate game. And I was like, oh man, I wish my best material wasn't always when we were on the bottom, but being able to lift people's spirits when you're in the toilet or the gutter really is kind of a special skill or not a superpower, but that's an ability I'm glad I have. As a child, there was a lot of suffering. Look, we were fine. We grew up in the suburbs of Boston. We could afford the rent. There was plenty of food in the cabinets and in the pantry, so much so that I was very overweight. I was a big, chubby kid, always shopped in the Husky section, used to hate when we would go to one of the local restaurants and it was pay what you weigh night because the scale always cost my parents more than anybody else. But in 1986, When the Red Sox went to the World Series, I was as big a Sox fan as anybody else, metaphorically and literally. And as people know, at that time it had been 68 years since the Red Sox had won a World Series, and everyone lived and died just like they do by their favorite Premier League team. Everyone in Boston, New England, Red Sox Nation lived and died by every single game, let alone the Sox going to the World Series. And so when they ultimately lost tragically to the Mets in 7 games, when they blew the big lead in Game 6 on a Saturday night with the Bill Buckner era, the champagne on ice had to be sent back, everything. And then ultimately there was a rain delay. They lose on a Monday. And after that game, I remember my parents let me stay up all the way till like 11:30 at night watching it on national TV. And when the Red Sox lost the World Series, I cried my eyes out. I mean, I bawled like you couldn't even imagine, just like a biblical outlet of tears. And it was very necessary. So much so that the next day, that Tuesday in late October, my mother let me stay home from school. And so she sent me Wednesday of that week, old chubby little sad 6th grade Nick Stevens, with a note. He used to always have the most exotic excuse notes for his absences. And mine read, verbatim, the best I can remember it, Dear Mrs. I forget my 6th grade homeroom teacher. Dear Mrs. 6th grade homeroom teacher, please excuse Nick for missing school yesterday. He was just too sad after the Red Sox lost the World Series. My homeroom teacher, the vice principal, the principal, all never even said like, you can't do that. They're all like, no, it's totally understandable. Completely understandable. It was a funeral everywhere that you went. Well, let's cut to 18 years later, 2004. The Red Sox, 2003, they lose in tragic fashion again to the Yankees in the American League Championship Series, 7 games. Well, in 2004, they reversed the curse in the American League Championship Series against the Yankees, come back from 3 games to nothing down, rattle off 4 straight, punch their ticket to the World Series, and that basically becomes fait accompli. That's like, the U.S. beating Russia in 1980 in the Olympics. Like, they had to go on to beat Finland, but that game was a throwaway because that was too easy. Just like the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals was a throwaway. It was almost too easy. But for Game 4, I was living in New York City at the time. I got out of work. I jumped in the car. I drove home 4 hours that afternoon just so I could go right back to the same living room with my mom and my dad. And my brother was going to Harvard at the time. He came home. My mom and my dad finished up theater rehearsal for a show he was doing, came back, and the 4 of us sat in the same living room that we sat, that had the same stink of salty snacks, tears, same cigarette stains, same crappy TV, and watched the Red Sox win the World Series. I'll never forget just what that felt like to experience the ultimate high and the ultimate low together in that spot.
Wonderful. And it encapsulates everything we spoke about, Nick, as far as the connective tissue, the family, the memories, the highs, the lows, the pure emotions, right? It's completely irreplaceable in any other walk of life.
I know. I don't know if I'll ever have a moment like that with my kids, but I'll never try to recreate. You know what they say, like, so much of what we see now in narrative Hollywood is, they say, member berries, nostalgia farming, the term, the requel, like it's a sequel, but it's also just a reboot of something. I don't need a requel of my memories with my kids. We'll have our own memories from live sports, playing together, coaching, etc. Even though I don't get to call my dad anymore during a football game, even though my mom won't be there to comfort me after a loss or write an absentee note for me, I'll always have that. And that's part of the richness of my sports fandom and my life to date.
That's beautiful. It's deeply personal. It's deeply qualitative. The discussions you have, particularly with family members, is based on your own opinions and your own emotions and your own thoughts and your own understanding and your own. It isn't just pounding out, like you said, ones and zeros and quantifiable statistics. It's based on something. It's based on something completely, like I said, subjective and qualitative. And that's what makes it even more special. So thank you for sharing that story. I'm sure you have more. You've got my brain thinking now of all the times growing up, those highs, those lows. And I'm not going to go through them all, but it's some memories that you will keep for your lifetime, whatever happens. And I remember seeing the documentary about Sir Alex Ferguson, who was the manager of Manchester United.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And as a Liverpool supporter, if my son supported Manchester United, I really would have failed as a father, like unequivocally.
That would be like if my kid came home one day and was like, Hey, Dad, I got some tickets to the Yankees, by the way. They're my favorite team. And I'd be like, oh, that's cool. You know what else is really cool? Sleeping in the yard from now on.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I took from it is he had a brain hemorrhage, like a stroke, later on in life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when he came to, the one thing he kept saying was, I hope I haven't lost my memory. I need to remember all those moments, all those games, all those losses. It was he didn't want to have forgotten all of those things in his life that revolved around the experiences of sport. And I thought that was pretty telling.
Like the experiential portion, not the physical portion of all of this, is the most important part. Listen, people are going to listen to this on a laptop or their car stereo or phone. All I would say afterwards is like, it's wonderful to be a part of somebody's hour of their life. And I hope it's been fun and inspiring in some ways. But like, hopefully when this is over, put the phone down and go have a catch, go to a game, or make a new real memory yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now we're going to finish on one last thing. We're going to go, our TGI to go. It's a quick fire round where we're just going to find out a little bit more about you and have a bit of fun to bring things to an end. So here's TGI to go. TGI to go. Sunset or sunrise?
Sunrise, because it means hope, because it means the birth of something new. It means opportunity. And considering that I've had to travel so much for my fandom, I would much rather drive with a coffee in hand into the sunrise, remembering where I just was, as opposed to fighting to keep myself away for the sunset coming back.
This one's from Larissa. Clam chowder or lobster roll?
Oh, clam chowder. Lobster rolls are great. I think can be a little bit overrated at times, but one of my favorite places to go when I moved to New York City, where I spent half my time, met my wife, and actually forged the satirical identity of Fitzy, the loudmouth Boston sports superfan, who really is basically kind of like an homage to my dad. And then now it's not so much a satirical character, but rather just a broadcast handle and nickname for myself. So even though I know you're not supposed to give yourself a nickname, but that's just kind of how people know me now. It's not a thing. But when I would come home, while my parents were still alive, we would always go, like almost clockwork. There's a restaurant in Quincy, Massachusetts. It's a sports bar. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And whenever I go in there, even if it's by myself or with some friends for a pint and to watch a game, I always think of my parents. It's a world famous, Sports Illustrated years ago named it the best sports bar in America. And they make the best clam chowder on planet Earth. So it's not just because what it tastes like to me, because it tastes like listening to my dad make bad jokes and spending comfortable time with my mom and looking at my brother and eye rolling the whole time and then watching the game. Like, it's the absolute best. Like, good. To everyone who likes like Rhode Island clam chowder, Manhattan clam chowder, kick rocks without socks. Get out of here. There's nothing like the full, fatty, authentic experience.
And staying on food, Italian or Indian food, which one would be your preference?
Oh, I mean, I love Indian food, but holy smokes, give me Hospitaliano every night of the week, and twice on Sunday because, the Sunday supper, a proper sitting down with good spaghetti and meatballs or a roast. It's also so, like, the crazy thing about Italian food, in addition to the fact that, like, there may be nothing more comfortable than your grandmother's, bolognese, whatever, lasagna, pizza, etc. Italian food is so globally influenced. It's kind of for people to just think that it is all spaghetti and meatballs and, pizza and whatnot. Like, there's so much more to it. There's such depth to Italian food. Northern Italian food is influenced by Germany and Latvia and all these Eastern European nations as well. I love the fact that there's so much to it and that it's the most comforting food in the world.
Now, the Super Bowl was on in New Orleans last Sunday. And I remember thinking, what are the top 5 like party towns in the US? If you had to go and cover a game, what would be your favorite city, Miami or Las Vegas?
Las Vegas, I can appreciate it for what it is now. I haven't had so many bad, like, oh my God, thank God what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas experiences. But like, it is a little soul showerish for me at this point now. I would choose Miami only just because I grew up going to Cape Cod. I love the beach. It's where I wish I could spend most of my time. I love Florida. I know a lot of people don't, but like, I would rather be in a beach town where I can be outdoors and experience sunshine and warmth. Plus, I've gone to some games down there and had a great sweaty time, as opposed to just being in I don't want anything synthesized for me. I'd rather just go there and yeah, also not have like some DJ just pulsing obnoxious, like, backbeats in my head all day long. So I would choose Miami between the two. It's one of the world's greatest cities. It's the best eating city in America. It is such an important place. Thank God it's survived all the trauma, the unfortunate incidents, the weather, and everything it has. My best friend from college, one of my best friends in life, is from there. I've been there 10 times. I would take red beans and rice, crawfish etouffee, and the best food, and a dirty surf and turf po' boy over just about anything else in the world.
Would that be if the Patriots are on the road, is New Orleans then your favorite destination? If you had to travel to, which one would be your favorite?
I've never seen them play in Kansas City, and a lot of my good friends are Chiefs fans, so I would love to go. I've been there before, had a great time. Could go out there for the barbecue, the music, and the fun. New Orleans would probably be tops, but I had an amazing time. I took my oldest boy, Thomas, to his first road Patriots game this past fall. My buddy who I coach flag football with also happens to be the father of his best friend where we live. And we all went together to see the Patriots and the Bears. And the game wasn't particularly great, but for 48 hours, all we did was sightsee and take in everything Chicago, which is another incredible city. Chicago is if New York and Boston had an overnight affair and their illegitimate love child just moved to the Midwest by the lake. It's the best of everything a great American city can offer. We just ate and drank and sports fanned and played and had 48 hours to a point where I flew home that weekend.
Wonderful.
Chicago would be right up there with any other place.
Awesome. And then the last question, Fenway Park or TD Garden? I think I know the answer.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the answer is Fenway Park.
When I'm all said and done, my preferred method of a bon voyage is just throw my old bones in a miniature makeshift Viking ship and have my kids fill it with memorabilia, steak tips, chowder, a bag of Doritos, some beers, light it aflame, and send me off into the ocean. Now, they probably won't allow that because it could crash into something and cause another incident. And like with most scenarios, I've made it worse for everybody. When I task my children with where the ashes will go, like, sorry guys, you're probably going to get in trouble, but between Thomas and Sawyer, one of my two boys is going to have to grab a fistful of dad's ashes and just go by the first baseline and make sure they're sprinkled at Fenway Park.
That's unbelievable. And if is there a stadium in the world that you would like to visit? Is there a stadium you think that would be a cool, outside of obviously the Bostonian ones, which you visit regularly?
I can't say there's a state. I've been to Wrigley, been to Fenway, been to most of the great parks and football stadiums and whatnot in this country. The World Cup is going to be in the United States. And I told them, like, I will do everything under the sun. Gillette Stadium, where the Patriots play, where I work, on a freelance basis, told them, I just want to take you guys to this because I want you to see, there's this Four Nations tournament going on right now that's replaced the NHL All-Star Game. Awesome. And I'm not even a big hockey fan, but it's been awesome because when you see the passion that people display on a nationalistic, countrywide basis in international competition, if I can't take my kids to a World Cup match, then I just want to hop the pond and take them to go see a soccer match over there. I've been to Fulham. I think I maybe mentioned that we chatted. And I've also seen NFL at Wembley.
Yeah.
And that is my favorite NFL game I ever went to because the mix of Americans and Europeans together in 3 hours of drunken song and chanting is unstoppable.
Well, thank you very much for today. Thank you for taking the time on a Sunday morning. I've really spectacularly enjoyed the conversation. I think we got into some really great areas that have been so profound and unique for this season. So I want to thank you very much.
Yes.
I guess there's no football today, right? Where are you right now with?
The NBA and the NHL were on their all-star break. Spring training has just begun. The NFL season wound down with the Super Bowl a week back, though there is really no off-season for the NFL. Like I always say, there is no methadone for football fandom in the United States. I'll say this about recording with you guys, although I know this is hopefully evergreen and who knows when somebody may consume this pod, but doing this on a Sunday morning, like growing up, Sunday's always it's the NFL day. It's a day when you would look forward to sport and, it's a great day off. I always remember like the sports reporters would be on ESPN and that would be an hour-long chat amongst sports reporters about games and things they love and narratives and storylines. I remember we used to always have CBS This Morning on when great storytellers like Charles Kuralt would be on, and Bill Geist, who was amazing. By the way, his book, Little League Confidential, if anyone is still listening, and if you haven't, God bless you. If you haven't read that, that's such a great book about being a sports fan, but coaching and just the hilarity therein. So it feels like a great time to just sort of sit back and unspool a thread and have a chat.
I think, Larissa, we've done a few Sundays, but we don't have the stresses of work and some other thing going on. It's pretty chilled out and relaxed, and you can just enjoy the conversation. And I've really enjoyed every minute of this conversation again.
Thank you.
And I hope we don't keep another 5 years.
No.
Till we talk again. Who knows where we'll be.
Just listen, just shine the as what I like to say, shine the Pat signal in the sky, and I'll come running anytime.
Well, there we have it. Another incredible episode today. Can't believe that's episode 9 of this incredible season. So I want to say huge thanks to Nick Stevens, aka Fitzy, for joining us today with such a great conversation. Okay, so that's it. Please check out our website, www.amdocs.com/The Great Indoors, for all our back episodes, content, and also our preview for Barcelona, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks. But until then, I'll say goodbye until our final episode of the season next week. And that's all there's left to say. So I'm Matthew Roberts in Toronto for Amdocs, and have a great day wherever you are.